Okay, before we start, I want to dedicate tonight's class for Beryl Meisel. Beryl Meisel was from the first people in the shul. Literally, when we first opened, he was there. And he was a very special person, as all those that used to know him. He was the one that used to bid against himself. When we used to sell aliyahs, he used to bid against himself. He was a very special neshama. So tonight's class is dedicated in his memory, Beryl Ben Gershom Moshe. Shamash have an aliyah. Amen. Okay, we're middle of, we started the din of Yom Kippur. So we spoke already about Mincha, Suda, Mafsekas, all those things we covered. Now, when you come to Kol Nidre night, the night of which this year is Friday night, so the custom is you wear a talis. We also wear a kittel, we discussed, but we wear a talis. Now, in order to make a bracha on a talis, the talis has to, generally speaking, you're not supposed to wear a talis at night. The night of Yom Kippur is an exception, but it says in halacha you have to make the bracha on the talis before shkia, before sundown. Because after sundown, it's already questionable night, and night is not Zman Tzitzis, it's not the time of Tzitzis. So therefore you have to be careful. Kol Nidre, besides the fact that Shabbos this year also, which doesn't change too much, but you have to make sure to put on the talis, to make a bracha on the talis before Shkia. So then you have Kol Nidre, you take out 3 Sefer Teiros. It's a very big mitzvah to buy the first Sefer Teira. It's brought on even the Machzim, Poskim, or the Shalah. A lot of Poskim write it's a big mitzvah to buy the first Sefer Teira taken out for Kol Nidre. And you have actually 3 people, because it's a Bais Din together with the Chazan. They permit to daven with the sinners and so on. Now, okay, so the night of Yom Kippur is, again, you have the Kol Nidre, but I want to discuss now the 5 things, what's called the Chamisha Inuyim, the 5 things of affliction. The Torah says about Yom Kippur that you have to ta'anu es nafsheseichem. You have to afflict yourself. And the Torah left it up to the Chazal, to the sages, to decide what is affliction. So one thing we know clearly, the Torah says you have to fast. There's no eating and no drinking. That is biblical. The other things, the Chachamim interpreted what the level of inui, what the level of affliction is. So for eating and drinking, if somebody eats or drinks, so then if they eat a certain amount, to drink a certain amount, so then the punishment for eating and drinking on Yom Kippur is kares, which is punishment from Hashem. Hashem makes the person die earlier. It's the same punishment as Chametz and Pesach, Nidan, all those things are the same punishment of kares. So that's definitely what you're not allowed to eat. So basically you're not allowed to eat the amount which would biblically be punishable is a size called a kiseves, which is a date. But again, that is probably a little less than, in practical halacha, a little bit less than 2 ounces. Drinking, what is the biblical amount that you chayiv kares on? That would be moli lugmav. Moli lugmav means, and this works by every person individually. Moli lug means you fill up a cheek full of water, and you spit it out, and you measure it. That is the shear that you chayiv kares. By a regular person, an average person, it's less. It's also like a little bit over an ounce by an average person. So that is the amount of that you get the punishment of kares. Any amount of eating or drinking, though, is still asim in atayt. It's still biblically forbidden because of the rule of what's called chatzi shiur. Half of the amount is also biblically, according to Rabbi Yosef, that's the halacha that is biblically forbidden. So you can't eat any amount on Yom Kippur. Even a drop of food, you wouldn't get kares, but it's still biblically forbidden. The only difference between the shiurim, or less than a shear, so poskim right, is if a person is sick and they need to eat. So if they need to eat on Yom Kippur, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, if you need to eat on Yom Kippur, so it's preferable to eat less than the amount that the Torah says is eating on Yom Kippur that you would get kares. So even though any amount is biblically forbidden, so nevertheless, you have to eat less than a certain amount. and drink less than a certain amount, and also in a certain time frame. If you remember, we learned by Pesach, by a lot of mitzvahs, you have to eat the matzah in a certain amount of time, because then it's called eating. So by Yom Kippur, l'chatchila, the shiurim is, if you have, let's say, you need to eat. So let's say less than a shear of a krisevis and malilugma would be, let's say, 1 ounce of food and 1 ounce of liquid. Now, food and liquid don't combine. They never combine halachically. Half an ounce of food and a half an ounce of liquid doesn't make you say an after bracha. So half amount of food, half amount of liquid, you could do together. But how much time do you need to wait between the eatings that it should be combined? So by Yom Kippur, generally we paskin 9 minutes. Sometimes if need be, you can paskin less, but generally speaking, you need 9 minutes. So if somebody is really, really sick, and this you can't do on your own, you have to get a heter from a Rav to be able to eat less than a shear. So then what the Rav will tell them, they should eat 1 ounce of food and 1 ounce of liquid, wait 9 minutes, and if they need to, they do it again. That's the concept of eating and drinking. Now, halachically, children should be taught, after over 9, by the way, it says in halacha, they should be taught to fast a little bit more than they would. If they normally eat in the morning, they should eat an hour or two later. You know, things like that, they should be trained into the eating of fasting. But boys 12 and girls 11, according to halacha, have to fast in Yom Kippur. Even though they're not obligated, but halacha says a boy 12 a year before the bar mitzvah and a girl 11 before bas mitzvah are obligated to fast in Yom Kippur. So that's as far, what?
The liquid ounces is 4 ounces. Like shake food. You said 1 ounce of each.
One is fluid ounces and one is weight ounces. Yeah, liquid. An ounce of liquid is not an ounce of food. It's a different ounce.
What about medication?
So if somebody has to take medication, they have to ask a shaila if they could do without it for a day, number one. Sometimes, again, I'm just saying general rules. Nobody should paskin anything for what I ever say at this class, b'chlal, because every case is a million differences. But generally speaking, any vitamins, obviously you're not allowed to take. Even medicine, so if you're talking about heart medication, blood pressure medication, thyroid medication, things that deal with, then you take it. So if you can take it without water, you take it without water. If you need to take it with water, then you try to do it with an ounce. So let's say you must take, let's say, 3 pills. And each pill you can't swallow less than an ounce. Okay, so what do? You take an ounce with one medication, you wait 9 minutes, take another ounce, but again, that's only after a Rav gives you and tells you that that's the way to do it. Now, pregnant and nursing women have to fast on Yom Kippur. They have to fast in Yom Kippur, unless if they're dangerously ill. But halachically, even when the doctors tell you, because the doctors always tell all pregnant women not to fast, but halachically you have to fast unless it's a high-risk pregnancy or things like that, where it's a different story. Okay, that's as far as eating goes, eating and drinking. As far as washing, you're not allowed to wash yourself at all on Yom Kippur, whether it's cold water, hot water, even part of the body. You're not allowed to stick your finger into cold water, into water on Yom Kippur, unless there's certain times when you're allowed to. So let's say somebody has a dirt spot. So you have a dirt spot, so then you're allowed to wash it off with a little water. If you have an infection, you need to soak your finger, so then it's medicinal, so then you would be allowed to soak your finger. But otherwise you can't. Even when you wash for negovas in the morning, when you wake up, you only wash until the end of the fingers. That's it. And you can't even wash your face. You have to wait until your fingers are damp and then wipe your eyes a little bit. But you're not allowed to wash. After going to the restroom, you only wash until the end of the fingers. Anytime you wash on Yom Kippur, it's only to the end of the fingers. Now again, if somebody is sick, they have an infection, they need to soak a foot, that's a different story.
In the morning, Natila is also.
Natila is only until this. Now what happens and this applies to kids or adults that have to eat on Yom Kippur. What happens if you're eating bread on Yom Kippur? So then you wash your hand all the way to the end, to the wrist, like regular. What's interesting, even though it's Shabbos, Yom Kippur, there's no Kiddush and there's no two halachos. So let's say a sick person has to eat on Yom Kippur. Torah says he has to eat. But there's no Kiddush. There's no two halachos. You just eat. Chacham did institute Kiddush or Lechem Mishnah on Yom Kippur. Whether it's Shabbos, no Shabbos, doesn't matter. So therefore, if somebody eats, so then they do wash until the wrist. There's another time when you wash until the wrist, and that is when you wash your Birchas Koyanim. The Koyanim, you wash them until the wrist. And if a lady always washes his hands before he washes a Koyan, so then he also washes his hands until the wrist. But it says in halacha you shouldn't enjoy it. In other words, you shouldn't. It does feel good, by the way. It says in halacha you shouldn't feel it. So now the question is like this: do you say Yala v'Yovi in the benching on Yom Kippur? If you're washing and eating, do you bench? So machlekes in poskim. It's even a machlekes what the Alter Rebbe would hold. But the Pashto, it's mashma that you do say Yala v'Yovi. But you won't find it in the Siddur, by benching. But you have to just say, B'Yom Kippur Mazal, like you do in davening. You're not going to find the Siddur doesn't say for Yom Kippur what to say in Yala v'Yovi. No. Again, if somebody eats, they don't have to wash. There's no chiyuv to eat challah or matzah, or kiddush. I'm saying, what happens if somebody is eating? They want the kids to eat a sandwich, right? They come to shul with a sandwich, and they eat a sandwich. So then they have to wash properly until the end of the wrist, like you would do normally.
Washing the right side.
What?
Is the issue of washing the right side or the Rabbanan?
The Rabbanan interpreted what the level of inui is, and one of the things of inui is rechitza. So it's a question: is that called minat Torah mid Rabbanan? But eating and drinking is clear minat Torah. Okay, next is, sicha, sicha means with a samach. It means smearing yourself. You're not to smear oils on yourself, which means, and poskim write like this, you can't put on cologne, you can't put on even deodorant to remove a foul smell. You're not allowed to put on Yom Kippur. You can put it on before Yom Kippur, but you're not allowed to put it on Yom Kippur. But again, if it's... somebody has an irritation, they want to put a little liquid medication, so then they... Shabbos, according to halacha, you can put on cologne. And clothing, for sure you're not allowed to. On skin on Shabbos is a machlekes in halacha if there's meila derecha on body. In the air, it's the same thing like this. In the air, and on the body is the same din. Clothing, everybody says on Shabbos or Yom Tiv, you're not allowed to put a perfume, to lack for better, to perfuminize it, that you can't because you're creating a new smell. It's meila derecha. Whether that din applies on the body or in the air is a machlekes in halacha. The Alter Rebbe, interesting, does not talk about in Hilchos Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe talks about in Hilchos Yom Tiv. In Hilchos Yom Tiv, the Alter Rebbe says years ago, when they washed the Koyanim for Birchas Koyanim, they would wash them with scented water. Not rose water. Scented water that smells good. That smells good. Scented, and they would actually make the hands smell good. That when they did the Birchat Kohanim, it came off, a good aroma. So there's a shaila in halacha, the Kohanim on Yom Tov allowed to do this. So the Alter Rebbe says it's better not to. Okay, and even the Bav Shiraban say you're allowed to, but it's better not to. But that's only if it's there to create a smell. If it's there to remove a bad odor, like if you're in the bathroom or something you want to spray, because there's a bad smell, so then for sure you're allowed to, because you're not doing it to create a new smell. You're doing it... Okay, now, you can't wear shoes. You can't wear leather shoes. By the apostle would say you can't wear any shoes. But you're not allowed to wear leather shoes. Leather shoes means if any part of the shoe is leather, you're not allowed to wear it. Even if a little edge on it on the top is a little suede or whatever, you're not allowed to wear a shoe that has any leather in it whatsoever. But you can have wood shoe, not wood shoes. Some people say wood shoes not. But you can have a plastic shoe, the sneakers today.
And there's other animals.
Huh?
How about other animals' skin, like crocodile?
No, that's all leather. That's leather. Leather is the skin of any animal. It's not only cow or whatever. Yeah. You can wear a leather belt, you can wear a leather shirt, you can wear leather pants, you can't wear leather socks because leather socks mean shoes. That's shoes that you can't do. Okay, to be continued.